I will give everybody a little bit of background on our panelists, and then we will have at it. Again, if you have questions, we're going to leave a little bit of time at the end, but if you don't get them answered, you can have at the panelists after that. All right, so to start, Justin Grammens is to my immediate left. Justin helped pull this together, as well as the March panel, so thank you very much. Sure. Justin's founder and CEO of Lab 651. They're a leader in mobile web and AI businesses and technologies. He also has been involved in so many things. I went to LinkedIn because I know a handful of them. I go into LinkedIn and I'm like, okay, which one of these things am I going to talk about? Well, the guy's got like 24 different things going on. So you're going to have to see him to get heads up on all the various activities he's got going. Thank you, Justin, for joining us.
Thank you, Rick.
To Justin's left is Gene MacArthur. Gene, welcome. Gene is entrepreneur and expert in residence in the digital DX ventures, which sounds very interesting to me in that she is, in essence, helping these companies get up and running. And then she's also involved with the Children's Cancer Research Fund, and that's good work, as well as important work. And then she's also advisor to many companies, speaks as an author as well, has a lot going on, which is a common theme. Thank you for joining us, Gene. And then Matthew Versace. Matthew, like Gene and Justin, has almost too many things to have going on because he's involved with his own business, a lot of different things happening there, but he did leave Optum and is available for anybody that would like to talk about anything AI or CT or anything in these categories. Matthew, thanks for joining us. And then with that as a starting point, why don't we start down here with you, Justin, and tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah, again, thanks, Rick, for bringing all this together and everyone for showing up. Mentioned Lab 651. Yeah, we do custom software development. We're doing a lot of work in the AI space today. But rewind the clock about 4 or 5 years ago, I actually started a group called Applied AI, and it's a community group. And if you don't know about it, go to appliedai.mn. We have been running conferences. I do a monthly meetup the first Thursday of the month. It's in the evening, so it won't conflict with this. And so the first Thursday of the month, I do a podcast where I talk to AI leaders as well. And I mentioned, so we have a conference coming up on November 10th. So you can check that out at appliedai.mn. There'll be a link off to the conference. I also teach at the University of St. Thomas. I teach a class on artificial intelligence and machine learning there, also on Thursdays, so a lot of stuff going on for that. So, but yeah, no, I definitely more than happy to stay after, speak with people about sort of their AI hurdles, their challenges. I've been in this space for quite some time, and more than happy to share my knowledge. And again, I really love getting together and networking with other people that are interested in the same topic. So thanks again.
Right, thank you. Gene.
So Gene Becker, to Rick's point, COO at Children's Cancer Research Fund. So there we look at how can we select and fund the truly most innovative research to get to breakthroughs for children with cancer. And obviously, data sharing and AI is part of that to shrink, a 12-year end-to-end process to 4 years. And, which in a children's life, it ends up you almost pick up another generation of kids for better treatments. And then I'm also the EIR for Digital DX. And what we look at is investing in, it's a Silicon Valley fund, investing in startups where they're applying AI for early diagnosis. I think about that, then you're really moving the starting line from a treatment perspective in healthcare, rather than catching something later along. You're able to then accelerate for better health, but then also lower cost. My history previously was executive at United Health Group, so leading enterprise digital and artificial intelligence, so building platforms for 60 million consumers. And then Ameriprise Financial and executive leading digital transformation, both for efficiency and value. So, right now, it's exciting to move from a digital transformation really to an intelligent transformation of looking at what does the cognitive systems look like at scale.
Great, thanks for joining us. Matthew.
Hi, Matt Versace here. I've been in this AI space since the 80s, so I've got some longevity here. I can look at the history recently also from Optum UHG in that AI space there. Done a lot of public speaking, entrepreneur, educator, taught at the university, just done a whole bunch of things. My role today is to try to bring as much useful information to your table as we can while we're up here, and then see where we go. And if we don't get everything covered, see us afterwards, and we'd be glad to kind of work with you any way we can. Back to you.
Great, thank you. All right, so the three buckets that we are going to start with are ethics and bias, pace of adoption, and then securities. Let's start with ethics and bias. On the ethics front, Gene, tell us a little bit about how the industry, as it evolves, about ethical challenges. How do you think they are going to come about? And then what can business people do to prepare for them?
It's right. So the first one to start with from an ethical side is really just bias within the overall data. And so if we look at artificial intelligence, of course, you're using data as a starter point to train your algorithms. And so I think about what's at stake here. Why do you care? At the end of the day, you're looking at an AI system that's going to recommend then, even from a decision support side, who would be interviewed, who would possibly be considered for a loan, which consumers, which patients are going to be put at high risk for medical review. And so that comes down to stepping back and following a NIST, as an example, a NIST risk management framework. And so that's the National Institute of Standards and Technology that helps guide from what data are you selecting for training and what that looks like for testing, for implementation, along with then ongoing monitoring. Otherwise, what ends up is that you're creating a system of where the bias is built in and you're moving at such a larger scale than, let's say, one human making that wrong decision on one individual, which is bad, but now you're at a much larger point. And the governance perspective on the framework is a key part again through the decision making throughout. And then lastly, from a company perspective, it really is your brand is at risk. As you think about the recommendations your AI system is putting out, you want to ensure that you're trustworthy and fair from a brand perspective, and that if you're not looking at bias or some of these ethical questions, then you're putting your company at risk. I feel like that's one of the larger distinctions from digital to the intelligent transformation. The digital, you just don't have as much brand risk as you do now with AI.
Yeah, the other thing that I would add on is, as consumers, as you're using these products, oftentimes they give you a thumbs up or thumbs down, right? You can basically say, is this looking good or is this not looking good? And I think we as a society or users of the system need to be able to utilize those functions, right? If you're getting something as a result when you start using some of these generative AI tools and it doesn't look right, then give it a thumbs down, right? We all need to sort of police this thing. And companies are putting up standards like you're talking about, and even like there's this idea of constitutional AI where they're actually training models that are following very, very strict principles, and they're running that through it to sort of check, but it's not going to be right. It's absolutely not going to be right. Nothing's going to be as close to as a human that the humans should be monitoring and policing this. So I guess I would just ask, if you see something, say something, right?
Mm-hmm. Right, just to kind of bring up the rear of that conversation, that ethics conversation is going to have a larger aperture as time goes on. Right now, historically, AI has just been machine learning, and that's based on, most common AI is machine learning, that's based on data. Now you get into generative AI, that's also based on data to an extent, but you don't have any control over that. What we've gone from is a space that has matured in the last 3 years or so in the governance and the best practices on data when it comes to making sure that that's correct for these machine learning models. Then all of a sudden Gen AI popped up in the last 6 months or so. Now you're in a situation where you as a human cannot trust. Trust is the big word. What you see, what you hear, or what you read. Now, what does that do to all the other spaces that rely on trust? So that ethics issue, now all of a sudden the aperture of that, and the best practices, and the mitigating circumstances, mitigating policies and practices, all of a sudden get a lot bigger. So what you're hearing now is just the birthings of something much, much larger. So keep that in mind as you go through this. That space is going to grow.
Any other ideas for ensuring that the AI systems can be designed and trained to avoid existing biases?
I would like to chime in on that, and I'm going to play the gadfly because you used the term ensure, right? And I love that the optics massaging, like we could potentially ensure that no one pushes a button and a nuclear holocaust could happen. How do you ensure against that? You don't, and you really can't. And if you look at the history of not what organizations do, but state actors and rogue actors and multinational organizations when it comes to developing a technology that's exploitable. Historically, in the industrial age, every country who's developed a technology or a strategic advantage has used it to exploit weaker countries without fail. And so we can't ensure anything. We can cope, we can mitigate, we can do a lot of things, but don't fool yourself to think that there's not a rogue actor, a rogue state, or a large multinational organization that has profit motives that don't align with yours, that will be happy, like in China and Russia, they'll be very happy to exploit those and expand those. I mean, Oppenheimer's famous statement was, when you find a technology that's promising, you do it, and you worry about the ethical considerations later, AKA father of the atomic bomb. So I just want to throw that gadfly part in there so that you don't hit an echo chamber and think that everything's hunky-dory. It's not.
Yeah, I guess I would agree with that. I think coming into understanding of how these models are trained and the data that they're trained on can essentially make you more aware and more conscious of it. For example, I mean, I had somebody on the podcast, and she was working in healthcare, and she was telling me that all this data is being fed from, a lot of it is being fed from the Cleveland Clinic, Mayo, Johns Hopkins University. Well, who are the clients that are there, right? They're all people that are oftentimes very wealthy, oftentimes, white individuals, males, right? So you're getting a distorted perspective. You're saying, Matthew, you're getting a distorted perspective with regards to what you're actually really looking at, because you're not looking at the general population when you go to start making clinical assessments. And that was kind of like an aha moment for me. I was like, really? She's like, no, those are the institutions that are giving up their data for these things. A lot of the Hennepin County, HCNC, a lot of these other hospitals aren't plugged into those networks. So you're already starting to see that bias sort of ripple through. And we just need to be aware of it and obviously adjust.
So I think that's the key issue, is adjust. If you look at science and the growth and maturing of science over history, it's got a historical aspect to it. It can only be understood and maturing as you look at it over time, as it unfolds over time. This is our first instance of looking at this kind of stuff as a society. And of course we're going to make mistakes. We're not going to have the DNA and genetic information that is representative on a global scale. But we as a society has recognized that and are moving towards that. That gives us hope. That gives us real hope and real promise.
Yes, and I think when you look at digital, we used to start out with small use cases, and you really just, can we prove something out? Is there something here? And with artificial intelligence, and you're putting into, let's say, your company, it's also the use case, but to think through what are the other 3 steps and horizons that you could be opening up. I feel like this isn't a quick, let's just try it out. You really have to have a framework, and you're right, it is really about risk management, but I would think through the implications and ripple effects with AI. It's not the same model as what we've been leading for the last 20 years.
Okay. Matthew, let's start with you regarding adoption. Before you get to discussing adoption, there's a buy-build decision, there's how are we going to integrate this. So maybe just talk a little bit about, from a business perspective, making that buy-build decision, integration, and then we'll look at factors after that.
Okay. So that buy-build, what are you going to do? How do you get involved? How do you just do it? For lack of a more comprehensive term, is based, in our experience, is largely based on the maturity of the organization going through it, right? You're either a baby, you're an adolescent, or you're a mature adult, metaphorically speaking. In each one of those spaces, you have different strategies that will help you. If you're just getting into AI as a company, whatever it may be, generally we see the center of excellence model popping up, right? You have a small group that's a one-size-fits-all for the organization that's bent on using AI to better the strategic product or service that the company's involved in, healthcare, making widgets, some kind of a process, logistics, whatever. But it's helping the main product of the organization. So that's kind of what happens when you first get in there. As you get some more mileage behind you, now all of a sudden AI strategy changes. You've got some experience, the organization has some experience, everyone can speak the same language, and then AI starts to seep into supportive roles like marketing and management and accounting and finance and HR, for goodness sake. They could definitely use AI. You'll see some of those kinds of things. The build and buy concern alters, it changes between that. Now the third step of that is a mature organization that is now integrating all of their capabilities with AI. You have to think of AI as not a point solution. You have to think of AI as a general purpose technology, like rubber, the steam engine, the electricity, domesticated animals, things like that. When you look at AI from that lens, it can be integrated in everything and everyone to change things fundamentally. And that also alters the basic economic power structure on a global scale. But it has the characteristics, like all the GPTs before it, of that. And so you need to think of it that way. It's not just going to be, hey, we'll apply it to our one core business process. No, it's going to integrate into the entire organization over time as the organization matures in its digital journey. And it'll take on different forms, and that will also alter the buy versus build. Usually it's buy initially, unless you're a big Fortune 5 with lots of cash, then you try to build things the best you can, and then it's build later on. So back to you.
Yeah, I think it depends on the organization in some ways, and what I tell people is focus on, and it might be a duh thing, but having gone through many of these sort of technology curves, the hottest thing that comes out, everyone jumps on it. Not why are you jumping on this thing? It's just because everyone else is, right? So what I really try to consult companies on are obviously what are the business processes that you have that are either, and I mentioned this last time when we did this in March, and it may sound like just I'm echoing here multiple times, but look at something within your business that maybe has 3 critical criteria, and this would be good for AI to be applied to. You have a case where humans are doing things that they're not good at. It's mundane tasks. It's things that are easily error prone that a human's going to get completely bored out of doing. You have a case where you have a lot of data. These models need to be able to be trained on data, right? Financials is great. You got a lot of data in finance, right? That'd be great. And then the third thing is you have a systematized process. You have some sort of way that a human is going through a series of steps to do. If you can hit even 2 out of 3 of those things, that is a prime candidate. And that's what I talk to businesses about is I don't really understand or need to really care a whole lot in terms of which industry you're in. But if you can talk to me about how your business is working and you have humans doing those 3 things, those are the places that we should start investing in. And oftentimes, a lot of my clients don't understand, they don't realize where a large language model should be used, like a ChatGPT, and where just regular old data science works just fine, right? And so that's another thing that I've had to talk to people about. Everyone's using OpenAI and ChatGPT. I'm like, what's your business use case? Do you need to do that or not today? And oftentimes, I've steered them a different direction. No. There are actually already existing ways that we can do this using data science that's been going on for decades. And the other thing that I try and talk to people about is find the low-hanging fruit. Like, find something that is just super simple. And you might have financial records for the past 10 years, but let's just deal with maybe the last quarter, for example. Like, let's pull off a small data set and work on something to prove this out in a short, quick iteration to understand where we're off course, because chances are, and I've built a lot of applications, I've built a lot of software, oftentimes you think the answer is over here, but you're just about 10 or 20 degrees off, right? So you need to walk down this path a little bit and realize, maybe this isn't the right thing. And that's where I feel the buy, build decision is you can start down that path, dip your foot, or your toe in the water, maybe buy something off the shelf for a little bit, but realize that might not be eventually where you go. But it's a journey, it's definitely a journey. And, I caution people, that, especially if you're a small business owner or you're an entrepreneur, you got to be able to pivot and try different things and understand that there are tools out there that are maybe not AI that would work just fine for your business today.
I think conceptually just have 2 components, and they're obviously a double click that gets into a web. At the highest level, smaller businesses looking at when you're selecting your vendors, looking at do they have AI plugins and other models. that becomes one of the factors. I think you're quickly already seeing many of the vendor companies are adding AI. And if it's really going to add value to your company, I would look at how are they training their model, but you can start getting pickup on productivity. On larger companies, you can already see it, and we know with the high tech, AI becomes a large enterprise AI model, and you become a platform. You're going to see even more platform businesses than you do today. And when you think about a platform business, the so what is that the business is collecting more information about the consumer, and you're going to start seeing industries blend even further together, let's say fintech with healthcare. And that's because you're the consumer. What you prefer will be the same on how you want to be sold on the retail side to health insurance, et cetera. And so that's where the larger companies will further go into a full AI platform side.
Great. Let's explore the adoption a little bit. Matthew, what factors do you think contribute to adoption rates, and how do organizations try to overcome any of the barriers to that adoption? Okay.
So now I'm going to go from the gadfly to relatively provocative. Hopefully everybody's had a great lunch so far before we go down this road. So we've already talked about the factors. These are the barriers to adoption. And this comes from experience at a Fortune 5 level, right? So when we first started this whole thing, we said, well, AI is not getting adopted because there's not enough talent. And so we took great pains and a lot of time, and we fixed that problem. We fixed it. And we said, well, AI is not getting adopted because there's not enough data. And so again, we took great pains and a lot of money and a lot of time and fixed that too. And then we said, well, AI is not getting adopted in the business process to strategically move us the needle in the digital transformation because of the infrastructure. So we took great pains and a lot of money over a number of years and fixed that also. And it wasn't until we started teaching AI to the managerial ranks themselves is where we found the problem. Now, we could talk all day long as to why the managerial ranks are resistant to adopting AI. That's a whole different conversation, a whole different rabbit hole. But that's what we found. That was a source of why AI was not getting adopted. So, real quick, show of hands. How many people are worried about AI taking your job? Raise your hand. How many people are too afraid to raise their hand? Raise your hand. Okay, so AI is not going to take your job. You know who's going to take your job? That next executive who is AI savvy. He's going to take your job. AI is not going to take your job, but the next guy who's hungry, who's taking the time to invest in that capability and wields that guy is going to take your job. So, back to you.
All right.
So much to hang off on that one. Yeah. I mean, big picture, I think the other component of adoption is when you look at the data, financial services and healthcare are the two that are lower in the chain of how fast to move there. And, those two are obviously highly regulated industries. And so to me, I think about and have done, you're always matching your use case to where's the maturity of the technology. To Matt's point, you have hallucinations with generative AI. So you're not going to make healthcare decisions using that just straight run through like maybe you would in retail, or when Netflix puts your recommendations of favorite movies, if they get one wrong, no one dies. And so, I think of in 2 time horizons, and we'll use healthcare as an example. One is to select the use cases and design and practice your governance around where is the value matched to what the technology can do well. But at the same time, building in AI is a core part of your overall growth strategy. I think, Horizon 1 and Horizon 2, we believe it's like 10 years in our mind, but it's not. We're on an exponential curve and we've already hit a tipping point. We know that over 100 million Americans have tried generative AI, and that's just since November. And so, again, it's more about matching to where we are, but planning for when the technology catches up to what the strategy is.
Yeah, lots of things to think about. I guess I was talking with somebody before this, and what I said to them was all these other technologies haven't really had this aha moment, right? They haven't had this killer app. And what I feel like ChatGPT did was gave everyone the killer app. You could basically go to chat.openai.com and you could basically start interfacing with this. And what it really did is accelerated the curve of all of this discussion. And I'd been working with generative pre-trained transformers, GPTs, since the first versions, and they were very ugly to begin with. And they were actually created back in 2017 was some of the first ones that OpenAI was working on. And so it wasn't until we actually saw 3 come out where we actually had enough data to really be able to have light bulbs start going off. Wow, this thing is actually pretty good. Potentially could take my job, right? We're not saying that it will, but people started getting worried. And I don't think it's going to take your job. It will take away tasks. It will take away tasks from things that you normally do, and you should view this as a component of what you do. But one of the other things that I think is interesting is just uncovering what it can do and what it can't do. And one of the things on this this sheet here that I hope you're able to take home is this idea of just workforce education, right? This idea that we all should start getting educated in this technology and understand what it can and what it can't do. And I think OpenAI and ChatGPT really gave us all of that power to have us start experimenting around with it. And now it's up to us to use it in the best way possible. But the adoption is only going to happen as we start experimenting around and playing with it. And I've seen all sorts of different technology trends happen over time. But the fact that OpenAI released this last November and we saw the adoption rate take off faster than any other piece of technology in the past, signifies that there's a huge interest in this, and that we should all start to educate ourselves, not only in the colleges, but also just online. There's plenty of free online courses you can take from Coursera that are just fabulous, that will get you up to speed on a lot of these things that are going on.
Great. So just a point on that, that education piece is primary. When we looked at technological disruptions, we noticed that the innovation curve was shrinking. Like, innovations happen again and again and again and again and again, and it shrinks. There are occupational disturbances that go along with each one of those innovations. Usually it used to be big innovation, occupational disturbance, rest for a little bit, recover, get your breath, and then another one happens. Now they're getting squished, and so it's happening over and over and over again. Now on the educational side, what that does to you in your tenure as a worker is normally you think about the 80% mark of your tenure. You start work fresh out of college, you retire at whatever age you retire. That 80% there, you think, I need to reskill. My skills are getting a little soft. The world has changed and I have not retooled. Because of everything that Justin just talked about, we're seeing that point being pushed back to the first third of your tenure in industry, which means you come in as a blah, 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 a third of your way or less. Now all of a sudden those skills have an expiration date and they are no longer viable. You need to reskill and be something different, or a bolt-on, or this and that. And we're seeing that that's an occupational massive disruption that's creating what we call the useless class, where the political system, the economic system no longer has any use for you and you get discarded because they're after someone else who's got those skills. That's disturbing, but that is what's happening. We have to mitigate that. That is a serious issue.
Hey, let's shift gears and hit security. Justin, let's start with you. Talk a little bit about some of the security concerns that come from using AI technologies, and then how can those be mitigated?
Yeah. Well, as I was thinking about security and AI, I was just thinking about security in general. And this has been going on for centuries. People build a castle and they put a moat around it, and then people break into the castle, so they build a bigger moat, and they build even higher walls. So what's happening now with AI in the security realm is you basically have information or disinformation happening at scale, right? So now one bad actor can start doing the work of what hundreds of bad actors could do in the past. And there's two sides of this. There's cybersecurity, which is all the firewalls and all that type of stuff, which if we have time we can talk about that. But I was thinking more around just society in general, right? And building up this lack of trust. If you start reading and believing everything that you read, and it's been essentially tainted or poisoned, that is where I think is a very interesting topic around just security and misinformation. And that is where you're seeing this leveling up of AI happening. You see AI bots that are creating all sorts of information, misinformation, and then you have the platforms that are doing that are fighting it, right? And I essentially see this over the next couple of years as AI versus AI. And there's going to be a number of different ways that companies are going to try and sort of thwart this. One of them is, I mentioned data poisoning. I mean, I think it's interesting. People are worried about putting their stuff into OpenAI because they think now OpenAI is going to have all my data. Well, if I was a hacker or an attacker, that's the first place I would go. I would start using OpenAI and dumping a whole bunch of garbage in there, right? And you're basically seeing that, and so now OpenAI has to try and filter all of that stuff out. But you should be understanding that there are people that are going to be trying to poison these models and try to put other information in there that is not good for our society. I'll put it that way. You've got a lot of AI-generated phishing attacks, right? So emails that people are coming through. If you haven't heard, there's audio, there's phone calls that are being made to people that sounds just like your wife or your husband or your daughter that says, you need to wire me money. I mean, this is happening today. Even deep fakes, right, are happening. I was talking with somebody before, but like when Russia invaded Ukraine, there was a deep fake on there that had, the Prime Minister of Ukraine basically saying, we should all surrender, right? No, it was false. But it was basically a video that went viral that everyone was saying, oh, geez, this war's over now. No, it wasn't. And the reason that they knew was because it really wasn't a good deep fake. You could sort of tell, but it's going to get better and better and better. And so, what are some mitigation techniques, right? I would say even more than ever, be critical of stuff that you see. You are in an echo chamber. I see this today. I go out on Google News. I see all of the news that I want to see. I don't see your news, right? I don't see what you're seeing at all. And so you start living in this own little world of whatever you see. And I think you really need to be skeptical about that. There's a White House AI safety pledge that's going on, but this is great. So the government's trying to bring together Google and Facebook or Meta and all these organizations to kind of understand how they can build safe AI systems. A lot of it goes back to the ethics side of it, but a lot of it is really related to, how can we ensure that the data that's being published through these systems is either watermarked in some particular way, which you haven't heard about that. A lot of these organizations now are going to start watermarking things, so if it's not watermarked, you know that it was generated by something else. It was not generated by anything that we know or that we can trust or verify. And I think that's a really sort of interesting way to start bringing some of the honest and accountability back into these generated pieces of text or audio or video, for example. And then the other thing I would say is how do you mitigate against some of this stuff? It's just simple checking your references, right? I'm not sure if you guys had seen this lawyer got in a lot of hot water because he submitted cited a whole bunch of court cases and stuff like that. And it was completely false, but it was just completely made up, right? So you got to do your homework. I'm sorry, you just got to do your homework. And it's the same thing. The other threat vector that I see is people are using it to generate code. Being a software engineer for 20 years, I understand it's really great to have it generate code for you. But if this code actually is malware, you need to understand that. And so you can't just be blindly taking code that it goes ahead and copies and pastes it. Pretty soon you're going to have code everywhere that's going to have a whole bunch of exploits in it. So you got to check your code and references no matter whatever it is.
Two things that add on to your point but you really nailed on the concepts. That was awesome. The two things for individuals to think about would be, again, when you have AI going at after from a cyber attack side, re-look at, have you frozen your credit? I think about identity theft of, are we serious about our passwords? Are you using the long ones? Are you repeating it multiple times? It just feels like a matter of time. It's kind of like initially we all got COVID. So it's a matter of, what are your protections from identity theft perspective? And then the second thing, just to double click on phishing, it's becoming sophisticated. So in my organization and other organizations, we've seen the email looks almost perfect around, they send it from an employee who does run accounts payable to me. They have an address from a vendor to accounts payable, and they just add USA. And so this is where, accounts payable could pay the invoice to a vendor we already have, and the money's out the door. Or you move direct deposit from, one employee to a different bank. And so, this is just using business examples, but to Justin's point, it's becoming sophisticated at an individual level also.
To throw more wood on the fire, when you look at AI, you have to think of it as an evolving kind of thing. It's changed over the years. If you remember old expert systems or Prolog, programming logic, things like that, and then we get into machine learning, now we're into generative AI. There's other types of AI that you haven't likely been privy to lately, like intelligent agents or what we call cognitive agents. Anybody play video games ever in here? Got kids who play video games, right? The bad guys you go out and shoot, the really good guys, the really good bad guys that hide behind pillars and then shoot you in the head, and they flank you and they talk to their friends, and the friends flank you and they put you in a corner and they get you because they can autonomously reason over context and figure out where you are and communicate with their digital buddies to put you in a position where you cannot get out of. That's called an intelligent agent, and it's mainly in the video game space. But that's another technology that that's out there that they're really concerned about. The military is big in that. All those drones that get dispatched to go after a target, those things are autonomously communicating, working with each other for an end result, their goal. Once they're dispatched, they're done. They go out, they just do what they do. And they figure out all kinds of ways to fix that. We played with that kind of technology that comes out of something that you'd hear of cognitive architectures. It's a new AI technology. It actually predates machine learning. But you haven't heard about that because it's in the elite academic and engineering space. When you hear about these things, it becomes disruptive technology. One of the ideas of that is that the everyday man can use it. That's one of the hallmarks of a disruptive technology. You can bet there's tons and tons of military dollars being spent on very disruptive technologies, but they're not available to the common man just yet. They're only available to elite academics and elite engineers, but that stuff is happening. So AI is evolving, and that's where these concerns come from. You just hear what the common man gets exposed to. There's all kinds of stuff in the basement you don't have visibility into, but we do, and there's money being poured into that, and all of a sudden things pop out of nowhere. So in that security space, they're not prepared for this either. They don't have a lot of the technology vision that some of these rogue states have that are well funded. So keep that in mind as well. That's important to know. That's a big industry, and they're unprepared at this point.
All right, time for maybe a couple of quick questions. Eric, you got your hand up first, so there you go.
I use AI to read Rick's brains and work with it. But, you know, I mean, AI versus AI Terminator comes to mind, Scott, the whole thing, of course. But where are we at in the cycle of adoption? Are we at Windows 7? We have, you know, Apple 4 platform, whatever it may be. How far are we away from Star Trek, Star Wars? Those kinds of AI technology where it's natural language and natural response.
So on the military side, you're advanced, right? Like we can make killer robots that are very effective. And I was an AI engineer for a military contractor before coming to the other side of the fence on the healthcare side of the house. Those things aren't conscious or sentient or deserve any kind of, rights or privileges that the rest of us do as citizens of the country. But we can make very good killing machines with low tech. Even then, it's in that intelligent agent space where they can have deep domain knowledge of their space and how to solve that. Now, we looked at some of this for a more laudable position in healthcare, like prior auths. Anybody else do a prior auth out there and realize that's such a painful process getting prior authorizations? It's because the route that we're taking historically to solve that was inadequate. And once we broke up the problem to think of it as a distributed problem and thinking, hey, we could use intelligent agents to fix this, now we came up with a solution that might be viable. So you'll start seeing, so that's where that is, I think. A lot of tech going from the industrial military economy, complex you won't ordinarily see. Some of it will siphon over into the regular corporate environment that you just see. And where appropriate, there'll be more crossover.
I think of it as from a society perspective of, we're now, to me, past the tipping point where you're looking at, let's say in the next 3 years, AI will be core to companies. So that means you're first going after tasks and then you're going to start melting jobs. Maybe, 40% of someone's role moves to AI and they have other things to do, but you used to have 5 people doing that role and now it's 3 or it's 2. McKinsey came out with their study with the generative AI coming out. The midpoint of when we, as let's say a country, get to 50% of tasks being automated, it used to be much longer and they pulled it into almost a decade from now. So I think about the key questions, and Justin alluded to it, of the government and businesses looking at how do we think about the next realm when jobs start melting even further in highly intellectual, highly skilled roles. And what does that look like?
Yeah, my additional to that is I think oftentimes you see these things saying, things are going to happen in the next 3 years, or the next 5 years, the world's going to change. And I just think back to self-driving cars, and there was prediction Elon Musk and a lot of people made that by now we would have self-driving cars. Like it was going to happen no matter what. And you look around and you don't. And it's still a very hard problem to solve. And I think in general with these technologies, you put a lot of emphasis on, well, it's just around the corner. It's just another year we'll be able to fix it. Well, I think it's going to be a long time before you have a car driving down Minnesota road in the middle of winter time, in the middle of a blizzard, driving it better than a human can.
Right.
But yeah, so I think some of the predictions that happen are a little bit overblown with regards to the timeline.
One last question, Robbie.
Excuse me. I'm Robbie Cordo of Cordo Advisors. I think a lot of people in the room here have applied, standard manual due diligence processes. We have a vision for automating that using AI, and there's a lot of gut intuition that goes into making a decision. How much of that do you think can be used with a ChatGPT or something? And I'm not an expert, my partner is. And how much do you think the person's going to still have to do?
And let me do a kind of a yes and, because we have bankers here from Highland Bank. They have to make banking decisions. You have Irish Titan and e-commerce. Do we build the e-commerce website this way or that way? So the whole kind of thing of trying to make A or B and it being more of a qualitative decision, wrapping it into that.
Go ahead.
So first thing I would throw out is the type of technology that you use have different capabilities. Machine learning is very narrow, even in the ChatGPT sense. It can't learn dynamically, it can't change its mind, it can't do a lot of things. There are other technologies like cognitive technologies, automated reasoners that are built to reason over unique contexts to find solutions. You'll see, but those have historically been relegated to elite academics and elite engineers in the military and other spaces that have good funding. You'll start seeing those kind of seep into the mainstream over time as they mature and as they get let out as well. So you have, the ability to see what's commonly available, but there's a whole lot of stuff that could do that kind of stuff, that kind of automated reasoning over context. That over time you could definitely see. Now, will it be able to handle tribal knowledge? I don't know, but I do know that we've used cognitive architectures in the clinical healthcare space to create clinically correct care plans because we use a different technology. Machine learning could never do that for us, but cognitive architectures could. But we didn't teach it from data. We taught it from clinical structured knowledge, and it was able to reason over that. And so you'll see new technologies being applied. And you can think of that with AI, like this is an evolving kind of thing. Those technologies will morph and change over time to bring something new to the table, and it'll have a very different set of capabilities. So you can expect to see that. How well that will fit into your business, only time will tell. Back to you. Or over to you.
But even with current technology, let's use generative AI. Many people are already using it in business for, to your point, a yes and. Give me a first draft, and then I'm going to use my expertise to edit it. It used to take me 25 minutes to do it, and now it's 4. Then you get into, the next companies are building their enterprise models of generative AI. So you're filling it with all of your policies of your company and personalizing the generative AI so the answers get even better. So maybe it took 4 minutes with a regular generative AI, and now that it knows my company policies, I can do something in 3 minutes or 2, and starting to whittle it down. So it feels like there are tasks right now with, to your point, many different types of AI that can at least save you time. and then it's just going to get better and better to whittle down that time.
Yeah, I think people sometimes use ChatGPT like they use Google. They just put a question in there or say, write me an email for this. There's this whole idea, you should Google it, called prompt engineering, where you basically need to sort of form the backing of how you want this thing to talk to you, right? And so an example, I have a small business. I try to sell to CTOs and CEOs of software companies. I say, you are a CEO of a bank, right? You are looking for a new custom software development shop. What are the things that are the most important to you? Me being an owner, and how can I serve you best, right? And then I ask the question, right? So what I'm doing is I'm basically implanting on the other side the ideal customer for me, and then I'm saying, basically, tell me some of your major pain points, and I use that then in my marketing material, right? I don't just go in and basically say, write me a blog about custom software development. No, you need to shape the words that it's going to use, and you need to give it context over time. So take a look at this idea of prompt engineering. There are thousands and thousands of prompts out there, but that is how you're going to get better performance, is if you tune the model in a certain way and give it context around what you want it to output. Because really all it's doing is just picking the next word. I'm telling people, it's just going to pick the next word most reliably of what it thinks based on its internal machine learning algorithm of what it's going to do. And so it's not like Google. It's not just tell me whatever it is. You need to lay the context out. And another fun thing, like my sons and I play fantasy baseball, and he'll send over a trade to me. Hey, do you want to trade, Mookie Betts for this other player? I'll ask my AI bot, right? I'll say, let me get back to you. I'm going to see what ChatGPT says, right? And so I basically say, I'm on a fantasy baseball league based on the information, yada, yada, yada. And then I say, the bot says no, so we're not going to do a trade today. But yeah, but all of that is context. You need to give context to this thing because it's going to give you a result. It's not going to give you a list of results like Google, and you have to do the research. It's going to give you a result. So the more you can tell it and shape the conversation, the better it's going to be for you.
All right, well, just like in March, we didn't even scratch the surface. I think we're going to have you back a third time.
Always fun.
I realize we ran a little bit long, but I want to close with a simple question. I'm looking for a short answer because we're already long. But for the professionals out there, what's one thing they can do today to either get themselves more educated on this subject or start the process to become more valuable to organizations in an AI-driven world?
Andreessen Horowitz has a blog where they have listed and categorized AI. So it starts with the basic level where you can go to links and then gets more advanced in studies, and they continue to update it. I love that because it can give you a quick lay of the land, and then you can choose where do you want to go deeper and have them do the work of what's next so that you don't have to do another Google search. Can you repeat that? Andreessen Horowitz. It's A16Z.com, and that they have their, it's a Silicon Valley venture fund, but they have an AI blog they keep up.
Maybe a little shameless self-promotion here, but attend the Applied AI events.
And when is that?
So that's November 10th. Okay. Is basically.
And where can they buy their tickets?
Yes, talk to me. Just engage with the community. I would say there's a lot of people that are trying to figure this out. All of us together. I'm by no means the expert. None of us, I think, here, I would say, are going to have distinct answers and the solutions to all of this. So we're going to figure this out together as a community, and I'm a big community person. So yeah, talk to me about that.
So you have to, well, a couple things. Don't fake it before you make it. That's terrible advice. Anybody who's ever given you that advice is horrible advice, right? So don't do that because technical guys can sniff that out a mile away. But you need advice. You need someone you can pick the phone up and call and trust that advice. Now, there are people you shouldn't trust, like the media, marketing and sales, lobbyists, things like that. Don't trust those, right? What you can do, our go-to guy was always the deep engineers who are making the tech, because they will ferret out all the hype and all of that kind of stuff very quickly, because they're actually inventing it. The words get changed as you go up towards the executive level. And you've all seen that before too. So find yourselves some really good engineers who are in the space you want to, buy them a beer or 6, and befriend them over time. They love, I mean, no one ever talks to these people, so they love the company. Find yourself a good engineer and then use them to help do that work for you, because you are executives, you don't have time to do this, or you would. And if you did, you wouldn't be executives. So you need someone you can trust, they give you an honest perspective. That's the route to go.
All right, October 5th, back here. It's only a couple of weeks because we moved this week. Let's say thank you again.